My daughter said I'd love the new place. She was smiling too hard. I'm Mark, 58, recently widowed, and Claire is my only child. She brings muffins and errands and plans that sound like help. I tell myself to be grateful, to be game, to be brave. The morning starts warm and ordinary. A clean mug on the counter, the photo frame faced forward on the mantel, the quiet that passes for peace. Sun lands across the table in a square, bright enough to make me blink, bright enough to hide the way her eyes don't quite meet mine. She keeps repeating the phrase, somewhere nice, like it's a promise and a lullaby. You'll love it. They do everything for you. The bag by the door is bigger than visiting size. It has my sweater, my slippers, my shaving kit. She says the steps outside are getting tricky. I say I take them fine. She says I shouldn't have to. I look at the frame again, our old faces, untouched by paperwork. I tell myself to ride along and keep my own counsel. We drive to Maple County's downtown, not to any address I know. I notice how she talks about traffic instead of destination. I notice how she parks for 10 minutes on a street with plenty of space. The building is glass and quiet. She says it's just the intake, and a man in a dark suit is waiting by the elevators. Not a nurse, not a tour guide. It's smoother if we start here, she murmurs, and I hear the softness people use with strangers in pain. Inside, a receptionist stands like a gate in a garden. She smiles at Claire first, then at me. We'll just check you in, she says, and it's the word in that hooks behind my ribs. I hand over my ID because the script of public counters lives in my bones. The man in the suit slides a folder across the desk like a dinner check. We've prepared a few things to save time, he says. Routine, Claire adds. Temporary, he echoes. My fingers rest on the folder. Paper has a way of pretending to be neutral, like rain. I open it and see my name printed above signatures that curve like mine, but aren't mine. I don't speak for a beat. I set the folder down so gently that I surprise myself. Go ahead, Claire says. It's just for the transition. I didn't sign these, I say. Dad, they're just copies. They are not. Silence folds itself into the carpet, into the glass, into the receptionist's posture. The man clears his throat like a judge summoning patience. This is a standard admission, he says, fingers poised at the edge of the folder, ready to steer it back to me. We can get you settled by the weekend. Admission to where? I ask, calm as I can be. To the residence, Claire says, eyes on the papers, not on me. Closer to me. With support. You'll like the activities. I live at home, I say. That is where I live. A small tremor walks through my hand and I pin it under my other palm. Stakes are simple enough to name. If I sign, I hand over my days. If I don't, I risk her walking away. The receptionist looks at me then, and it's a real look, not the glossy one meant for forms. She hesitates, a thin human pause against a moving belt of process. The man in the suit nudges the pen toward me. Just initial here and here. I push it back with 2 fingers. No. Claire's smile disappears like a pulled shade. Don't make this hard. Hard is pretending I agreed. She leans closer, voice soft. I'm trying to help. Say where we are, I answer. Say what this place is. Her eyes flick to the plaque on the wall. She chooses a phrase that doesn't answer. It's all connected. Medical, financial, everything coordinated. We're saving you stress. She sounds practiced. She has been coached. I decide to do the small, brave thing before I forget how. I ask for the folder. I read the first page twice, then close it. These are not my signatures, I say again, steady. I put my ID back in my pocket. The receptionist inhales. You can hear the intake even over the muffled hum of copiers behind the wall. She looks at the man, then at me. She is the only person who looks directly. Would you like to step aside and review with me? She asks. A small offer, a thin bridge. I nod. Claire's jaw tightens. On the carpet, the light is sharp as a rule. The room waits for my compliance like a mouth waits for a spoon. I stand there and feel the old weight of being somebody's father, the soft force of it. And I remember that love is not paperwork. I remember that my life has edges I still choose. I slide the folder back across the desk without signing a single line. Claire smiles again, but it's the parking lot smile, stretched and brittle. "He's tired," she tells the room. "We can finalize later." The man in the suit turns to me, voice smooth enough to shine. He didn't need to lean. He still does, like we're sharing a secret. The lawyer asked if I understood I was being moved. The pen slipped before I could write my name. The lawyer's tone stayed smooth, almost kind, the way someone speaks to a nervous patient. He called the missing lines a temporary oversight. Behind me, Claire hovered close enough that I could feel her breath on my shoulder. "It's routine, Dad. Just make it easy," she whispered. Easy. The word sat heavy. My hand trembled, but not from weakness, just anger without permission to show itself. Paper rustled as he flipped a few pages forward. My hearing aids caught every shuffle. Every small instruction passed between them like a script rehearsed too many times. I could hear their smiles even when I didn't see them. The witness, a clerk in her 30s, kept her eyes on the floor, pretending to check her watch. Her silence was louder than anyone's words. When the pen touched paper, the room shrank. The faint scratch sounded too final. It was the sound of trust fraying thread by thread. I stopped halfway through the first curve of my name. "This isn't right," I said. The lawyer froze, then leaned closer. His voice dipped in syrup. "It's just consent for care coordination. Nothing binding." "Then you sign it," I replied. He smiled like I'd told a small joke. Claire sighed. "Dad, please. You're making everyone uncomfortable." "I'm the one being signed away," I said. The pen rolled from my fingers, tapping twice before it stopped near the edge of the desk. The clerk flinched at the sound, as if she wasn't supposed to react. I pushed the papers back toward him, keeping my hands visible, steady. "Not today." The lawyer tried a softer tactic. "If we wait, services may be delayed. You don't want gaps in care, do you?" "I want honesty," I said. "Start there." Claire's lips thinned. "He's just tired," she told him. "It's a lot for him." Her words didn't aim at me. They were an explanation offered to the room, as if I were an object that required managing. Something in her tone switched from concern to control. She leaned closer again. "Just sign the first page. I'll handle the rest." I said no. Her expression hardened, then softened again, the practiced rhythm of persuasion. "I'm trying to help." "You're trying to hurry," I said. For a long second, nobody moved. The clerk glanced at the clock. I could hear the tick over my pulse. The lawyer gathered the pages, tapping them against the desk to align the corners. The sound was surgical, precise, deliberate. "We'll reschedule," he said. "Perhaps next week." Outside the office, Claire walked faster than me, phone already in hand. She was muttering something I couldn't catch. The echo of that ticking clock still sat behind my ears. By the elevator, she turned, her voice quieter. "You can't keep resisting everything. People will think you're confused." I looked straight at her. "Then let them think." She hesitated, as if realizing that a part of me she counted on being soft had stiffened. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in first, face tight, fingers still scrolling. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. I stayed silent. The stakes felt simple but sharp. Signing meant surrender. Refusing meant isolation. Either way, something was already gone. When the doors closed, the air changed, heavier, still carrying the faint mechanical whir of the pen's drop. That sound followed me home, a small ghost of what I almost did. At dusk, she was already waiting on my porch. The bags that once lived in my hallway were gone. Her car trunk was open. My keys sat on the table beside her, separated from their ring. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "It's for your safety," she said. By nightfall, my own daughter held my keys. The locks changed before I came home. I stood on the porch, key in hand, feeling that small click of refusal. It wasn't the sound of a jam, it was deliberate resistance. The brass turned rough in my fingers, cold enough to make me flinch. For a moment I thought I'd made a mistake, that maybe the lock had stuck from the weather. Then I saw the small scratch around the keyhole, fresh metal showing like a wound. The smell of dust and stale air from inside drifted through the frame when I knocked, but no one answered. I knew then that something in my life had shifted without my consent. Claire arrived half an hour later, her tone too light for the hour. "Oh, they must have come early," she said, stepping past me as if nothing was wrong. She held a folder, thick and neatly sealed. "It's just paperwork from the bank. I've been streamlining things for you." Streamlining. That word again. Clean, efficient, harmless on the surface, cutting underneath. She laid the folder on the counter, her nails tapping twice. "Joint access. Makes it easier for me to help." "I didn't ask for that," I said. "You didn't have to. It's family authorization." She said it like it was a kindness. She slid a withdrawal slip from the folder. "For bills," she added quickly, eyes darting away. The paper showed $4,200 taken out 2 days earlier. My name was printed beside hers, connected by an ampersand that didn't exist before. The ink looked new. "It's all handled," she said, smiling like she'd done something noble. My jaw tightened. "You signed for me," she shrugged. "It's the same account, Dad." It wasn't. "Don't start," she said, her voice dipping into warning. "You're not good with this stuff. It's better this way." The light through the window dimmed, a long shadow cutting across the table. I picked up the folder and felt the embossed edge of the bank's seal, proof that this wasn't just talk. "When did you do this?" "A few weeks ago. They said it was fine." "They shouldn't have." "They did," she snapped. "And stop acting like I'm stealing from you. You've been overwhelmed since Mom—" I didn't let her finish. "Don't use her to justify this." Her expression froze for half a second before softening again. "It's for your protection," she murmured. "If something happened—" "Something did," I said. "You changed my locks." She looked away. "You're overreacting." Maybe I was, but the air in the house didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls looked the same, but they leaned toward her side of ownership now. She walked through rooms like an inspector, commenting on dust, the mail, the smell of old coffee. I followed, each step heavier. In the kitchen, she dropped a new key onto the counter with a tiny metallic tap that made me wince. "This one's easier," she said. The metal felt wrong against my skin, too sharp, too new. I went to the bank the next morning. The clerk, a young man with an apologetic smile, checked the records. "It shows joint authority filed 3 weeks ago," he said. "Family access clause." His tone softened. "It's pretty common for older clients." "I didn't request it," I said. He hesitated. "Then it shouldn't have been processed, but it's active now." The stakes were clear. My home and savings were no longer mine alone. I felt a thin tremor under my ribs, the kind that comes before a decision that can't be undone. I thanked him, asked for a printed record, and walked out. Outside, the air was crisp enough to sting. I stood there for a full minute, folder in hand, the sunlight bouncing off its glossy cover. Every reflection felt like someone else's name on my life. That night, Claire called. "Did you go to the bank?" I did. "You didn't need to," she said. "I told you I'd handle it." "I want to know whose name is on the deed." Her pause was long enough to make the silence feel alive. "Mine," she said finally, her voice turning sharp when I asked whose name was on the deed. I found the bills didn't match the care I received. The nurse handed me a folder, her hand trembling just slightly as she said, "You might want to see this." I opened it and saw rows of charges I couldn't place, numbers too clean to be mistakes. The antiseptic smell in the office stung my nose, sharp and chemical, like something meant to hide decay. On the page were 4 lines. $200, $900, $1,400, $700. The total came to $4,200, exactly the same amount Claire had taken for bills. My name sat neatly beside each inflated entry. It wasn't sloppy. It was intentional. I asked the nurse, "What are these for?" She hesitated. It says medication management, mobility therapy, private transport, and nutritional consults. I didn't receive any of that. I know, she whispered. That's why I made a copy. I stared at the figures again, the ink a little darker where the printer must have paused. My pulse picked up. Who submitted it? Family authorization. It routes through the same account that covers your care plan. Claire's phrase, streamlining things, echoed in my head like a warning I hadn't taken seriously enough. Later that afternoon, she showed up unannounced, holding a coffee she didn't drink and a smile she didn't mean. "You got the ledger?" she asked before I said anything. I did. And? It's wrong. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. No, that's just insurance reconciliation. It always looks high before adjustment. I called the ombudsman. They said it's finalized. Her face dropped half an inch, the kind of shift only people trained in lying forget to hide. You called them. They'll review it. Dad, you can't do that. You don't understand how this works. I understand enough to see my name on false charges. For a second, something sharp flashed through her eyes. Fear, maybe anger. Then she smiled again. You're tired. You need rest. That word, tired, was becoming her tool. Every time I resisted, she used fatigue as proof. The stakes were suddenly more than money. They were my credibility. If she could convince others I was confused, she'd own more than my accounts. She'd own my narrative. I told her to leave. I need time to think. She put the coffee on the counter and leaned closer. Think about what this looks like. Calling agencies, making reports. You're going to make people doubt your judgment. Maybe they should, I said quietly. She left without another word. The door closed softly, but the silence afterward felt deliberate, like punishment. That evening, the nurse called again. I shouldn't say this on the phone, she whispered, but be ready. They might send someone to evaluate you. Claire's been talking to the doctor. For what? She said you've been confused, forgetting things. I haven't. I know. But the system listens to the first voice it hears, not the truest one. Her warning lingered long after the call ended. I opened the ledger again and spread the pages out on the table. The antiseptic smell seemed stronger now, seeping from memory into the air. Every number looked like a piece of me she'd priced and sold. I thought about how quickly she'd gone from caretaker to strategist, how the language of concern could hide theft so cleanly. 4 false charges, each small enough to seem plausible, together enough to make me powerless. The nurse's words returned. They'll test your patience before your sanity. She was right. They'd already started. The system trusted signatures more than stories, paper more than truth. I sent the ledger scan to the health office that night with a short note, review requested for billing discrepancy. It felt like mailing proof of betrayal to a stranger, but it was something tangible. Proof mattered now. Memory wasn't enough. As I sealed the envelope, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Older, thinner, but not broken yet. I could lose the money. I couldn't lose the right to be believed. The phone buzzed once more before midnight. A message from Claire. Don't make this worse. I stared at it, then turned the screen face down. My hands smelled faintly of antiseptic, and I couldn't tell if it was from the clinic or my own fear. That smell would stay with me long after the folder was gone. I realized my health had become her proof. He asked me questions that weren't about my health. They sounded simple, too simple. What day is it? Who's the president? Do you ever forget to eat? Each one came out soft, like he was testing a child's patience. The room was colder than usual, a steady chill that crawled across my shoulders. Claire stood behind him near the doorway, pretending to tidy a stack of papers that didn't need moving. Her silence filled the spaces between his questions like punctuation. Who called you? I asked. He smiled politely. We were contacted by a family member concerned about your well-being. My family member? I said slowly. He nodded, already writing on his clipboard. She mentioned some confusion. It's best to establish a baseline. I'm fine. Of course, he said, voice still smooth. But it helps to be proactive. Proactive, another word that meant control. I tried to steady my breathing. He made a show of checking my pupils, my reflexes, my memory. I remembered every detail he asked about: dates, names, appointments. When he finished, he scribbled a note at the bottom of his form and tore off a copy. "I'll file the full report with the clinic," he said. "It'll be on record within the week." Claire stepped forward before I could read it. "Thank you, doctor," she said. Her tone was syrup-sweet, hiding something beneath. She followed him to the door, whispering low. I caught just 3 words: "Please mark concern." Then the door closed. When she turned back, her face was full of concern again. "You did great," she said. "They'll help make sure you're okay." "I didn't ask for help." "I know," she said softly. "That's what worries me." The stakes were rising, but not in money or comfort. It was truth itself being rewritten while I watched. The folder on my table already held 1 false ledger. Now there'd be a report to match. Paper was becoming her language of power. Later, when she left, I called the clinic myself. The receptionist's tone was brisk. "Can I help you?" "I need a copy of my medical report." "Of course. What's the attending physician's name?" I gave it. Silence followed. Then cautiously, "I'm sorry, sir, but it shows a confidentiality hold. The requesting party is listed as your guardian." "I don't have a guardian." Another pause. "Then you'll need to resolve that through the referring source." "Who was the referring source?" More silence. I could hear the faint click of a mouse, then her voice, softer now. "It says Claire." Something in me went very still. "And the report? What does it say?" "I can't release it directly to you," she replied. "You'll have to request a formal review." I thanked her, though my throat felt tight. I hung up, staring at the phone as if it had turned into a stranger. The air still felt cold, a deliberate kind of cold that someone controlled with purpose. The next morning, the report appeared on my table, slid through the mail slot. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was hers. I opened it carefully. The first line hit like a blow. "Exhibits signs of early confusion, cognitive decline, probable." I read it twice, 3 times. The words were so neat, so final. Not a question, an assertion. I remembered every second of that exam, and still, the paper said I was slipping. I went to the kitchen and poured tea just to have something to hold. The cup's warmth steadied me for a moment, but it couldn't stop the chill spreading beneath my skin. The report sat beside the mug, edges curling from the steam. I thought of the doctor's soft tone, his eyes already half decided before I opened my mouth. I thought of Claire, watching, memorizing how submission looks. That afternoon, I called the nurse, the one who had quietly helped me before. "Did the doctor send you anything?" I asked. Her voice came through low. "Yes, but it's not right. The clinic doesn't take unscheduled home evaluations. Someone pushed it through under your file." "Can I see it?" "I'm not supposed to, but—" She paused, breath catching. "You didn't authorize this, did you?" "No." "Then be careful," she said. "That report's already in circulation. If she uses it, you'll need more than denial." I could feel my autonomy thinning, like air leaving a room. The cup had gone cold in my hand. It wasn't about illness anymore. It was about evidence, and she was writing it for me. That evening, I called the clinic again. "I want a copy of my own record," I said. The woman on the line hesitated. "Sir?" "I'm sorry. The clinic refused to send me my own report." An envelope arrived addressed to my guardian. The word stopped me before I even tore it open. Guardian. I stood by the window, staring at the handwriting. Hers. The perfume was unmistakable, faint but clinging. The same one that used to fill the car when she'd drive me to doctor appointments. I held it a moment longer, half hoping I'd read it wrong. But when I slid my finger under the flap, the seal gave with a quiet tear that felt too final. Inside was a folded letter from the county court. Black print, official header, no greeting. "Notice of pending guardianship," it read. My chest tightened. There it was in writing, a decision about my life made without me. My name appeared in the first paragraph, followed by the word Ward. I had to read it twice before I could move. I called the clerk's office immediately. A young woman answered, her tone brisk at first, then faltering as I read the header aloud. "Can you check who filed this?" I asked. The shuffle of papers on the other end lasted too long. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "It lists your daughter." For a few seconds I said nothing. The quiet felt thick, like the air between closed walls. "There must be an error," I said finally. "I don't think so," she whispered. "It's stamped and logged." "What does it mean?" "It means there's a petition for guardianship. It's scheduled for review in 2 weeks." The number stung. 2 weeks. That's how quickly I could lose legal control over my own life. "Thank you," I said, though the words barely made it past my throat. By afternoon, I was at the courthouse. The air inside smelled faintly of paper and polish, that official mixture that makes everything feel permanent. I found the clerk's desk, the same voice from the phone. She recognized me before I spoke. "I'm not supposed to show you this," she murmured, but she turned the screen anyway. "See? Filed by Claire Roberts." There it was again, my name beneath hers, marked as dependent. "I never signed anything," I said. "You don't need to. The petition alone starts the process." The stakes couldn't have been clearer. My daughter had turned the system into her accomplice. Every document that claimed to protect me was being weaponized to erase me. I asked for a copy, and she hesitated before printing. "If anyone asks," she said softly, "you didn't get this from me." As I waited for the printer, a man in a gray suit walked by, nodding politely. He paused when he saw the form. "Guardianship case?" he asked, almost casually. "They move fast if it's uncontested." "It's contested," I said. He smiled faintly. "Then you'll need counsel. Don't wait." The clerk handed me the papers, edges still warm. My name looked foreign in that font, like it belonged to someone less alive. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and caught one more trace of her perfume. It was everywhere now, on my mail, on the furniture, on the choices she was making. Care had a scent, but so did control. Outside, the courthouse steps felt taller than before. The afternoon sun hit the marble, bright and indifferent. People passed by, unaware that one envelope had redrawn the boundaries of my life. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hand, trying to decide what to do next. If the system could be tricked, then it could also be shown the truth. I wasn't powerless yet. Not completely. I'd lost trust, I'd lost control of my accounts, but not my will. The proof was in my pocket, and the next step would have to come from me. As I turned to leave, the clerk called after me in a low voice. "Sir," she said, glancing around before leaning closer, "you need representation." He believed me before I finished my story. That alone made the room feel different. No smiles of pity, no cautious pauses, just focus. The light through the narrow window stretched across his desk, cutting the papers in two, half in shadow, half in gold. His name was Tom, and he didn't look up until I was done. When I stopped talking, he closed the folder in front of him and said quietly, "We can fight this." I hadn't realized how tense I was until I heard those words. "You believe me?" I asked. He nodded once. "You're coherent, detailed, and consistent. That's evidence in itself." He reached for another document from the pile beside him. "This is a counter-petition. It requests immediate suspension of the guardianship claim and affirms your competence." He placed a pen beside it, neatly aligned with the margin. "You'll need to sign today." The paper felt heavy. Not like the ones Claire had pushed across tables, but weighty with possibility. I read every line twice, the legal language stacked like bricks, building a wall I could finally stand behind. I signed at the bottom, my hand steady. Tom checked the page, then added his own signature beneath mine. "We'll file this now," he said. "Time is your enemy in these cases." By noon, the filing was confirmed. The clerk stamped it with a firm thud that made the desk shake slightly. I watched the seal press into the paper, a mark that meant I was no longer silent. The stakes were clear. I wasn't just defending property or accounts, I was defending personhood. Tom leaned back, his tone softer. They'll push harder now. Expect it. How? I asked. Financial chokehold, he said. It's the first move every time. He was right. By 4 o'clock, Claire's lawyer had received notice of the petition. By nightfall, the reaction began. My phone buzzed with a single text. We need to talk. I didn't answer. The next morning at the grocery store, my debit card declined. I tried again. Same result. The cashier's polite smile didn't hide her discomfort. Maybe try another card, she said, but I only had one. When I called the bank, the representative sounded rehearsed. I'm sorry, sir, but joint authorization restrictions have been applied pending a review. I asked who initiated it. It says family representative. My stomach tightened. Claire had frozen me out within hours. The swiftness of it was almost admirable if it hadn't been so cruel. I walked out of the store with nothing. Even the air outside felt sharper, like it carried edges. Tom called later that afternoon. I got notice from opposing counsel, he said. They're claiming financial instability as justification for the guardianship. Typical move. So they take my money, then accuse me of mismanaging it? He sighed. Exactly. But the good news is you've got documentation. Receipts, ledgers, the nurse's report. I'll need copies of all of them. I gathered the papers that night, laying them out on the table like evidence from a crime. Each line item told a story of quiet theft. The folder looked small, but it was enough to begin. When I brought it to him the next day, Tom flipped through the pages carefully. This helps, he said, but prepare yourself. She'll make it personal. Next. She already has, I said. This isn't about money anymore. It's about control. He studied me for a moment. Good, he said finally. You're seeing it clearly. That's what they hate most. He drafted an affidavit confirming my mental soundness, complete with witness verification. We'll submit this tomorrow morning. It'll buy us some time. He smiled faintly. You're not powerless, you know. I wanted to believe that. For the first time in weeks, the fear was giving way to something sharper. Resolve. The light from the desk lamp flickered against the document, turning its surface almost reflective. I could see my hand resting beside my signature, steady, defiant. That image anchored me more than any speech could. Before I left, Tom said, "She'll reach out again. Don't respond emotionally. Let the paperwork talk for you." I can do that, I said. You'll need patience. That's something she can't freeze. By evening, I was home again. The quiet felt cleaner now, not oppressive. I placed the affidavit beside the phone, knowing the next move would come soon. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed once, a message lighting up the screen. She texted one word, ungrateful. By then, every envelope felt like a threat. Bills, forms, notices, each one another blade dressed as paper. But this time, it wasn't the mail that cut. It was the morning newspaper. Her face filled the front of the local section, smiling in that gentle way she'd perfected. The headline read, "Daughter protects ailing father amid decline." My name appeared 2 paragraphs down, framed by pity and fiction. The air was still. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I read the article twice, every word twisting what had happened. She called me confused but sweet, a man who sometimes forgot conversations and needed guidance. I hadn't forgotten anything, but the world didn't know that. Now they would remember her version instead. By mid-morning, the phone started ringing. Old friends, neighbors, each call began with concern and ended with distance. "I read about you," one said softly. "Must be hard." Another asked if I was getting the help I needed. They meant well, but their tone said it all. They believed her. One story had undone years of truth. I called Tom right away. "Did you see it?" He sighed. "Yes, we expected this. She's weaponized sympathy. That's her strongest card. Don't respond publicly yet. Let me handle the correction through legal notice." I pressed the phone tighter. "By the time that prints, it'll be too late. He paused. "Truth's slow," he said, "but steady." After hanging up, I stared at the paper again. The ink left faint smudges on my fingertips, black stains that wouldn't rub off easily. Outside, 2 neighbors walked past the gate, their voices low. I caught fragments. "Poor man. Shouldn't be alone." I shut the window, but their words stayed. That afternoon, the clinic nurse, the same one who'd warned me before, called. "You need to hear this," she whispered. "I found your cognitive assessment recording. You passed every test, perfect recall, orientation, comprehension. I saved a copy before it disappeared from the files." "How could it disappear?" "Claire requested it. Said she was updating the records." The click of her voice recorder through the receiver hit me like proof come alive. I listened to my own voice from that day, confident, clear, steady. It was the opposite of what the article claimed. "Can you send it to me?" I asked. "I already did. Check your email." When I opened it, the audio played softly through the speakers. Hearing my voice defend itself felt both vindicating and painful. It reminded me that I hadn't imagined any of this. The stakes were no longer just legal, they were reputational. Once a lie spreads, you can't call it back. That evening, I forwarded the file to Tom. "This recording kills their claim," I wrote. He replied a minute later, "Good. We'll attach it to the response motion. Don't engage anyone directly." But isolation has its own gravity. The phone kept ringing, not for help, but for gossip. I stopped answering. Even silence became a weapon. Every unanswered call felt like a trap, every text like bait. I began keeping a log. 2 calls before lunch, 3 by evening, 5 total that day. Numbers were the only thing that stayed honest. Then, late that night, I scrolled through the article's online version. Beneath it, buried between the accusations, I saw one comment that stopped me. It read, "Let him speak." Just 4 words, unsigned. But it was something, a crack in the wall of silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest turn of the tide. Maybe someone still wanted to know the truth. Maybe the story wasn't completely hers to own. The next morning, the phone rang again. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another voice from her side. But this time, when I picked up, the tone was different, calm, professional. "Mr. Roberts," the caller said, "this is from the Herald. We're following up on your daughter's interview." My throat tightened. "What do you want?" She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The reporter called asking for my side. They made me sit at the end of the table, not beside my advocate, not near the judge, just far enough to remind me where they thought I belonged. The room was cold, the kind of chill that doesn't fade once you notice it. Claire sat 3 chairs away, her posture perfect, her lawyer murmuring in her ear. Across from us, the judge adjusted her glasses and scanned the documents laid out before her. Every sound, the shuffle of paper, the scrape of a chair, echoed sharper than it should have. Tom leaned toward me. "Stay calm. Facts win slow but sure." I nodded, my palms pressed against the wood grain, tracing the faint groove running along the table's edge. It looked worn, like it had seen too many people try to prove they still mattered. When the clerk announced, "Case of Roberts versus Roberts," the room stilled. The judge began with pleasantries that felt anything but. "We are here to review the petition for guardianship filed by the daughter and the counter-petition for rights retention filed by the father." Her tone was neutral, but I could hear the weight under it. Claire's lawyer rose first. "Your Honor, this is not about conflict. It's about protection. My client has acted only out of concern." He gestured toward her, and she gave a small, practiced smile. Then he gestured toward me. "Unfortunately, confusion has made his judgment unreliable." Tom stood before I could react. "Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts those claims." He nodded at the clerk. "Please play the recording." The small microphone on the table clicked. For a moment there was static, then my own voice filled the room. Calm, steady, answering the doctor's questions one by one. The same voice Claire had tried to erase. The sound carried through the courtroom like a pulse, drawing quiet gasps. The judge leaned forward. "This is the evaluation referenced in Exhibit D?" Tom nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Conducted by the clinic before the guardianship filing." The playback continued. I could hear the examiner ask me the date, the city, a series of words to recall. I answered each correctly. When the final question ended, the recording clicked off. The silence afterward felt heavier than the sound itself. Claire's lawyer cleared his throat. "That may have been an earlier assessment. Decline can occur rapidly." Tom didn't blink. "The file timestamp is 6 weeks ago. Not exactly ancient history." Claire shifted in her seat. Her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. I caught her glance, half anger, half disbelief that the truth had made it this far. Behind us, someone whispered, "That's not confusion." Another voice followed softly. "She said he was incoherent." The murmurs spread, faint but undeniable. The judge looked directly at me. "Mr. Roberts, do you believe your daughter coerced or misrepresented your condition?" I took a breath. "Yes," I said simply. My voice didn't tremble. The word hung in the air like something solid. For the first time, it was her turn to flinch. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. "Understood." She turned to Claire. "Did you authorize medical contact without his consent?" Claire hesitated. "Only to help. He needed structure." Tom interjected. "Structure doesn't include forging signatures or freezing accounts." The judge raised a hand. "One at a time." Then quieter. "We will return to the financial aspect after reviewing the remaining documents." My pulse steadied. Around the table, I could feel the shift, the subtle realignment when truth finally lands somewhere it belongs. I wasn't winning, not yet, but the ground under her story was cracking. Tom whispered, "We're breaking through." The clerk collected the evidence packets, placing the recording file on top. The air conditioning hummed harder, as though the system itself was listening. The judge leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. "The court will recess for 15 minutes to review discrepancies in testimony and submitted materials." Claire's lawyer started to rise, but she grabbed his sleeve, whispering something too low to catch. Her face had lost its calm mask. The corners of her mouth twitched in anger. I stayed seated, watching her eyes dart from me to the judge's bench. When the bailiff called recess, I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Tom placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did exactly right," he said. "Now we let the evidence breathe." People began to file out, low chatter rippling through the corridor. A reporter near the back scribbled notes, glancing up just long enough to catch my gaze. Outside the window, the reflection on the glass caught our shapes, 2 figures still standing, while others moved around us. The crowd's noise faded as the door closed behind the judge. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Truth, for once, had been louder than the lies. The judge called for a recess to review discrepancies. The court wanted numbers, not feelings. So that's what they got. Columns, totals, withdrawals, signatures. Facts arranged neatly in ink. The auditor laid the report on the table like it was a body on display. The light above the bench caught the glossy pages, making the figures gleam almost cruelly. My advocate didn't speak at first. He just let the silence stretch long enough for everyone to feel the weight of what was written. "The audit confirms 4 unauthorized transactions," the auditor said. His tone was neutral, professional. $4,200, $3,000, $2,800, $2,000, totaling $12,000. Each number landed like a gavel strike, the arithmetic of betrayal, simple, undeniable. Across the room, Claire sat rigid, one hand gripping the edge of her folder. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering fast, but she didn't look at him. She didn't look at me either, not once. It was as if we were strangers in a room that used to be a home. The banker, a soft-spoken man in his 40s, took the stand next. The signature on these withdrawals was inconsistent with the authorized account holder's file. We verified against the specimen on record. The judge nodded. And who initiated these transactions? The banker hesitated. The secondary account holder, listed as family representative. My chest tightened, though I'd expected the answer. Tom stood and spoke firmly. Your Honor, the account change was made after the petition for guardianship was filed, but before it was approved. That means the petitioner acted without formal authority. The judge looked down at the paperwork. So these funds were transferred during a legal limbo. Yes, Your Honor, Tom said, while my client's access was restricted. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the clerk looked up briefly from her notes. Claire's lawyer adjusted his tie and finally spoke. This was a misunderstanding. The funds were moved temporarily for medical coverage. The auditor interjected, calm but sharp. If I may, there were no corresponding medical charges in the statements. The expenditures were traced to a personal account ending in 2271. Tom turned to me. That's her personal account, he said quietly. I nodded, not out of surprise, but confirmation. The truth was no longer a theory. It was written in black and white. Claire's lawyer stood again. Even if this occurred, intent must be established. Financial confusion during emotional distress is common. Tom didn't flinch. Confusion doesn't involve forged signatures. The judge's pen tapped twice against the bench. Enough. His eyes moved from the folder to Claire, then to me. We will recess briefly. While the room shuffled, I kept my gaze on the pages. The checkbook copies. My own name contorted, strokes uneven, the loop of the R broken like a nerve. I remembered signing so carefully years ago when we opened that account together. Joint security, she'd called it. I'd believed it then. The banker approached before stepping down. For what it's worth, he said softly, we see this more often than you'd think. I thanked him, though the words caught in my throat. There's a special kind of humiliation in being part of a statistic. When the clerk announced recess, Claire rose quickly, brushing past me. The faint scent of her perfume, familiar, intrusive, trailed in the air. I sat back down, forcing my hands flat on the table to steady them. The truth was there, in ink and arithmetic, and yet my body still trembled. Justice, it seemed, had a long appetite. Tom leaned closer. This is the turning point, he said. They can't explain away $12,000. I exhaled slowly. She'll try. She can't try forever, he said. Numbers don't bend as easily as stories. The judge's clerk returned, whispering something to the bailiff. Papers were exchanged, heads nodded. Then the judge re-entered, settling back into her chair. The court acknowledges evidence of unauthorized use of funds pending verification of signatures by forensic analysis. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. Her tone left no room for interpretation. Tom gathered the folders, sliding them neatly into his briefcase. We're close, he murmured. She's running out of room. As we stood to leave, I caught one last glimpse of Claire across the aisle. Her expression was unreadable now, composure cracked but not gone. She whispered to her lawyer, who placed a hand on her arm. Outside the courtroom doors, Tom paused. They'll try to settle quietly before this goes public, he said. Stay firm. I nodded, though my focus was still behind me, back in that room where the truth finally carried weight. Every lie she'd told had been calculated. Now every dollar was counted against her. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like the one on trial. I was exhausted, yes, but anchored. The facts had spoken in my voice when no one else would. The corridors hummed faintly with chatter as I stepped into the daylight, briefcase in hand. Claire's lawyer requested a private meeting. They said the court would decide my future. I sat still, hands folded, the faint hum of the courtroom filling the air. The judge entered without preamble, robe brushing the floor, expression unreadable. Tom sat beside me, quiet but resolute, the weight of months pressing between us. I stared straight ahead, refusing to glance at the empty chair across the aisle where Claire should have been. She hadn't shown up for the verdict. Maybe she couldn't. The judge adjusted her glasses and began to read. This court has reviewed all filings, testimony, and evidence submitted regarding the petition for guardianship. Her voice carried through the room with the kind of precision that cuts through doubt. The petition is denied. All rights are hereby restored to the respondent. For a moment, I didn't breathe. The words hung there, suspended in the air, almost unreal. Then the clerk repeated them, slower this time, for the record. Guardianship petition denied. All rights restored. The sound of the gavel cracked once, sealing it in the world. Around me, the murmurs began, soft ripples, a few gasps. Someone in the back whispered, "He won." I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like the truth had finally caught up, but left nothing untouched. Tom leaned closer. "You're free," he said, barely audible. The words felt fragile, like glass in my hands. The bailiff approached, offering a single sheet stamped and signed. "Official notice of reinstatement," he said. The document trembled slightly in my grasp, the paper warm from the copier. My name, my real name, followed by the words, "Full legal authority restored." I traced the edge with my thumb, not out of disbelief, but to anchor myself in the moment. The judge closed her folder and looked up. "This decision reflects the evidence presented and the respondent's clear competence. The court thanks both parties." She gave a small nod toward Tom, then to me. "You may proceed with reinstatement of financial and residential control immediately." It was over. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The echo of it filled the space where Claire's voice had once dominated. I looked toward the courtroom window. Sunlight flickered faintly across the pane, cutting thin lines through the dust. The air felt lighter, yet older somehow. Freedom carries its own kind of silence. Tom gathered his notes. "We'll get copies filed by noon," he said. "Bank access should unlock within 24 hours. I nodded. "She's gone." "She knew the ruling," he replied. "That's why she left early. It's easier to walk out than to face it." The thought hit hard. All the battles, the accusations, the letters, none of it had been about care. It had been about control. The court hadn't given me justice so much as handed back what should never have been taken. Reporters shuffled near the back door, pens poised, murmuring to each other. "Will he speak?" I heard one whisper. Another replied, "Give him a second." I stayed seated, letting the noise blur into the background. My eyes drifted back to the gavel resting on the bench. Ordinary wood, yet it had drawn a line between truth and theft. I thought about the stakes that had driven everything: dignity, trust, and the right to my own life. Things so basic, they shouldn't have needed defending. My hand brushed against the document again, as if to reassure myself it was real. Ink on paper, proof that the system had finally listened. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. "Take your time. You don't have to talk to them." "I know," I said. My voice came out steady. "But they should hear it from me, not her." He gave a faint smile. "Then choose your words carefully. The world loves redemption stories, but it forgets who paid the price for them." I stood slowly, legs stiff from hours of stillness. The bench creaked as I rose, the sound echoing faintly around the chamber. One of the clerks nodded as I passed. Another offered a small smile. The gavel strike still echoed in my mind, final, irreversible. As I reached the doors, Tom held them open. "You're not the same man who walked in," he said. "Maybe," I answered, "but I remember everything." Outside, the corridor glared with brightness. The murmur of voices swelled into a steady hum. I could see the outlines of cameras waiting near the steps, flashes already starting to flicker through the glass. Freedom, it seemed, came with an audience. Outside, cameras waited for my comment. Flashes blinded more than her betrayal ever did. As I stepped through the courthouse doors, a wall of cameras met me. Voices overlapped, questions fired like bullets. "How does it feel to win?" "Will you forgive her?" "What's next for you?" The air pulsed with the frenzy of people hungry for closure that wasn't theirs to claim. The light kept bursting, white, sharp, unrelenting. It bounced off car hoods, coats, the courthouse windows behind me. I raised my hand to shield my eyes. The last time light had struck this hard was inside that same building when the judge's gavel fell. This one felt different, colder. Tom guided me through the crowd, his briefcase pressed close to his chest. "Keep walking," he murmured. "Don't give them a headline." But they already had one. Someone shouted, "He's the man who took his life back!" Laughter followed from somewhere, though I couldn't tell if it was meant for me or against me. Each flash froze me for a fraction of a second, another picture, another version of a man they didn't know. Halfway down the steps, a young reporter stepped out from the chaos. I recognized her, the same woman who'd once written Claire's side of the story, the devoted daughter piece that made me a cautionary tale. She lowered her camera now. "Would you like to say anything on record?" I met her eyes. "Not today." She nodded, not surprised. "Then off the record, do you feel free?" I paused. "Freedom's quieter than I thought." She held my gaze for a second, then stepped back. "We'll make sure it's written that way." Tom hailed a cab, but I waved him off. "I'll walk." The street stretched ahead, almost empty beyond the courthouse steps. The air carried the smell of rain waiting to fall. My coat collar turned up against the wind. I walked past the reporters regrouping for evening deadlines. Behind me, I heard one of them sigh. He didn't even smile. I didn't owe them a smile. I'd spent a year proving I wasn't broken, and now they wanted a performance of healing. That's not how recovery works. It happens quietly, in the pauses between other people's noise. Later that evening, I found the photo online before it hit print. My face filled the frame, eyes half-shadowed, coat pulled tight. The caption read, "Man reclaims freedom." No pity, no embellishment, just the truth. Beneath it, the reporter's byline. I realized she'd rewritten the story. She emailed the draft that night. "I wanted you to see it first. No spin this time." I read her words twice, slower the second time. She'd stripped away the drama, leaving only fact. The hearing, the verdict, the simple statement that justice had been served. Nothing about illness, nothing about decline, just dignity, restored. I typed back, "You wrote it right this time." Her reply came minutes later. "It was always supposed to be your story." I turned off the screen and sat still. The room felt larger than before, as if air had returned after a long absence. Through the window, lights flickered on across the street, each window glowing faintly, lives continuing in quiet rhythm. I caught my reflection in the glass. The lines on my face looked sharper, but my posture straighter. The expression wasn't pride, it was steadiness. For months, my life had been reduced to paper, ledgers, petitions, transcripts. Now, one photograph had rewritten it. Justice hadn't arrived with applause or apologies. It had arrived like morning light, plain, visible, enough to see by. Tom called to check in, his voice cautious. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said. "I just need to breathe again." He hesitated. "She'll reach out." "I know." We ended the call there. I folded the newspaper clipping on the table, smoothing the crease once. The photo looked back at me, frozen proof that I'd survived without bitterness. Outside, the city carried on, indifferent but honest. Then the phone buzzed again, this time a different tone. The screen lit up with her name. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from everything left unsaid. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Claire called that night, but I let it ring. The door opened this time when I turned the key. It stuck for a moment, metal grinding against the latch, then gave way with a dull click. The sound felt final, like something had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The locksmith handed me the ring with a small nod. "It's yours again," he said. I stepped inside. The air was still, carrying that dry, unused quality of a place untouched for months. My hand brushed along the doorframe, rough, a little chipped, familiar. Beneath my fingers, I felt the grain of old paint, layers added and forgotten. It wasn't the same color I remembered, but the texture was what mattered. "Need me to check the locks on the back door?" he asked. I shook my head. No, I'll do that myself. He left quietly, the echo of his boots fading down the hall. I stood in the middle of the living room and just listened. No footsteps upstairs, no voice calling my name from another room. Only silence. Uncomfortable at first, then grounding. The furniture was still there, though moved slightly. The chair by the window faced the wrong way. The coffee table had scratches it hadn't before. Little reminders that this space had been borrowed, not lived in. I set my bag down on the counter and walked to the window. Outside, the trees were the same. They'd waited, patient and indifferent. On the mantel, I placed a photo frame I'd carried with me through everything. The glass was clean, the frame worn smooth where my thumb had rubbed it over time. It felt like a ritual more than decoration. The photograph, a younger version of me and Claire, taken long before any of this, stared back. I didn't turn it away. I just let it sit there, quiet witness to what survival looks like. Later that afternoon, the protector from the property office arrived. She carried a single envelope and a smile that looked almost proud. "We got the transfer. Processed," she said, handing it over. "The new deed. My name restored, stamped, and dated. A line of ink that meant ownership, not of a house, but of peace." I ran my fingers across the paper. The edges were crisp, the surface thick. "So it's final?" I asked. "It's final," she said. "No contest." I thanked her, and she hesitated before leaving. "You did well," she added. "Most people don't come back from something like this." I waited until she'd gone before sinking into the chair by the kitchen window. The cushion sagged, just slightly, the way it used to. I hadn't realized how much I missed that small imperfection. I made coffee. The old machine still worked, humming weakly like it was relieved to be useful again. The smell filled the house, soft and grounding. For the first time in a year, it didn't feel like someone else's air I was breathing. I walked room to room, not inspecting, just remembering. The bedroom walls still held faint outlines where paintings had hung. The hallway mirror tilted to one side, warped enough to make my reflection unfamiliar. I smiled, faintly. Even the flaws belonged to me now. Tom had called earlier to confirm the court clerk had closed the file. "It's over," he'd said. But I realize now that endings aren't loud. They don't crash. They settle. As evening came, I opened the windows. The cool air drifted in, carrying the faint sounds of the street below. Bicycles, a distant dog, someone laughing. I leaned against the frame and let the breeze move through the room. The light outside shifted, softer, slower. Everything that had been taken from me had left its mark, but the scars didn't own the place anymore. I took another sip of coffee and looked around. Every object, every small thing felt earned. Not given, not inherited, but reclaimed. The walls didn't forgive, but they accepted me back, and maybe that was enough. As the night settled, I noticed one detail that stopped me. On the far shelf, by the corner of the room, a frame faced backward. I hadn't touched it. Maybe I'd missed it earlier, or maybe someone had left it that way deliberately. I crossed the room, hesitated, then left it as it was. One frame still faced backward on the shelf. I turned the photo at last and saw my own face clear. The frame caught the morning light, glinting off glass that had gathered a thin layer of dust. I hadn't realized how long it had faced away, how long I'd lived pretending it didn't matter which side it showed, but this morning, it did. It mattered more than anything. The meeting flyer still sat folded beside my mug. The smell of coffee filled the small kitchen, strong and familiar. It reminded me of days before the courthouse, before petitions and signatures and sealed envelopes. I took a sip and felt the heat settle, steadying me. At the community center, chairs had been set in a circle. 10 of us, maybe 11. Different stories, same ache underneath. The woman leading it smiled when I entered. "First time?" she asked. "First time talking," I said. She nodded like she understood. "That's the harder kind." When it came to my turn, I held the leaflet in my hands, fingers pressing into the paper until it softened. I lost more than money or rights. I began. I lost the version of myself I thought no one could take. The room went still, but the court gave me back what she couldn't: truth. A man across from me whispered, "That's worth everything." "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't erase the rest." The leader leaned forward. "You don't need to erase it. You just need to name it." I paused, the words catching somewhere deeper than expected. Her betrayal broke the surface of everything I believed in: family, trust, memory. But it also showed me what survival actually looks like. It's not grand, it's quiet. Someone handed me a paper cup of coffee. I stared at the steam curling upward and said, "I made myself a promise when this started, not to be erased quietly." The woman beside me reached for my hand, a small gesture, no words. Across the circle, heads nodded, some with tears, some with resolve. Each face mirrored a different form of recovery. We weren't there to fix each other. We were there to remind ourselves we still existed. Afterward, the group stayed talking in pairs. I stood near the window, watching people leave. One of the younger members approached. "Your story. It'll help someone else tomorrow," she said. I smiled faintly. "Then it was worth telling." She folded the meeting note into my coat pocket before leaving. "Keep that," she said. "It's proof you showed up." When I got home, the afternoon sun had shifted across the floorboards. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt hollow. I walked to the mantel, where the frame still sat turned backward. My hand hovered over it, hesitant. I remembered every sound that used to fill this space: the laughter, the arguments, the silence that followed when things went wrong. Now, the silence had changed shape. It was no longer heavy. It was mine. I turned the frame slowly. My face looked back at me, clear beside hers. For a moment, I studied it, the line of my jaw, the calm in my eyes. Time had aged us both, but the truth stood unchanged between the glass and the paper. I thought about that first promise, made when everything felt lost, not to be erased quietly. I'd kept it, even if keeping it meant breaking what once felt unbreakable. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I took another sip from the mug, its warmth steady against my palms. Through the window, the street lights flickered on, one by one, as the world carried on outside. I sat down, letting the quiet fill the room. Every object, every wall, seemed to recognize me again. There was no celebration, no grand revelation, just the slow return of ownership over my own story. In that small moment, I realized something simple. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about space, making room for peace to exist again. I leaned back, the photo catching the last bit of light before dusk. For the first time in a long while, the reflection didn't look like loss. It looked like balance. Silence finally sounded like peace. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story. With respect and gratitude.